Let's make some coasters perfect for holiday gifts. Welcome, I do sewing and DIY related content, and today we are making some coasters. I'm going to be using these kind of Christmassy fabrics, the gingerbread man and then this red fabric, and in addition you are going to want some cotton batting. So you can see here that I have 100% cotton batting. This is going to help with the coasters, especially since they are made of fabric, to just help absorb any water that would come off. Now in addition, we are going to be making a little tie that will go around these coasters, so if you want to do that as well, you would need some interfacing just to make it a little stiffer. Now to cut out our fabrics, like I mentioned, you're going to want two different types of cotton material. I'm going to be using this red material, and we're going to be cutting these out into 5-inch squares. So however many coasters you want to make, in this case I'm going to be making 6 coasters. I'm going to be making a set of 4 and then just 2 extras. So I would need to cut out 6 pieces of this red material, and then I will be cutting out 6 pieces of the gingerbread material as well. I found that 5 inches works pretty well, gives you a really nice size coaster. I saw different patterns online would go between 4 inches to 5 inches, so really whatever you feel would be a good size coaster for yourself. So now I have these cut out. I'm going to continue cutting this out with all my other fabrics. So as you can see here, I'm just going through cutting out more of that red, and then I'm going to continue cutting out the gingerbread man fabric. So as you can see, that Kath decided that she wanted to help as well with this. She comes up many times in this video, so she definitely had fun with these coasters too. So while I am sticking with this gingerbread theme, you definitely do not have to. You could use whatever fabric you have on hand. I just think they're going to be really fun for the holidays. Next, for the inside for this batting, you're going to want one piece of that 5-inch by 5-inch square batting for each coaster. So now it's time to start assembling these. So we're going to have the front of our coaster and the back of our coaster with right sides together, so there's 2 pieces of fabric, and then the batting will go just on top. So as you can see here, I'm going to be using my quilting clips and clipping all 3 of these pieces together. So what this is going to do is allow us going to have a little sandwich essentially that we're going to sew all the way up, and then we're going to leave an opening on one side. So as you can see, between this orange clip and the yellow clip, that is where my opening is going to be, and I'm just going to sew all the way around this coaster, stopping at the orange clip, starting at the yellow clip, leaving that opened. And I'm going to repeat those exact same steps for all of the coasters that I'm going to be making. So however many you're making, you're just going to pinning them up or using quilting clips, and you get this nice sandwich effect. So you have your right sides of your fabric together, and then you have the batting. So you want to make sure it's in that order. Now when I'm starting, I'm going to be, as you can see, I have that gap between my quilting clips, and then I'm taking about a 1/2 inch or so seam allowance. I'm just going to begin sewing this up, going all the way down till I get to the corner. Then when I get to the corner, I'm going to put my needle down, pivot my fabric, so my needle is staying inside my fabric. Going to take the quilting clip off, and then I'm going to continue sewing, and I'm going to repeat this for each of the corners, so making sure that I'm keeping my needle into the fabric when I pivot it just makes it a little easier, and I can do this all in one seam. So here is what my fabric looks like, that seam looks like, and now I'm just going to continue all of these steps for the rest of my coasters, so sewing up those 3 layers together, making sure I leave that opening. Now, if you struggle with straight edges, especially when you're trying to do those straight seams, I got this little seam guide and I found it incredibly useful so that you can make sure you're taking the correct seam allowance all the way through. It's a magnet, it sticks on your sewing machine, and then you're able to line up your fabric with that seam guide, and the whole time it kind of allows you to make sure that you are doing the correct size seam allowance. You'll see I'm going to be using this a little later as well, but just a little helpful hint. I know that coasters, they look really simple, but sometimes getting those straight lines can be a little difficult, so this is just something to help you out. You can see that it helps you when you're turning to figure out how far you want to go in, and then you're able to just readjust your fabric, do that pivot, and then continue sewing on. So now that I have all my coasters sewn up, it is now time to trim all this extra material and to clip the corners. So I'm just going to go through, clip the corners, and then trim off any of the extra batting that I had, any extra fabric. That way when it comes time to turn them, they'll turn a lot smoother and a lot easier. Once it is all trimmed and ready to go, it is now time for us to turn our coasters right side out. So for this, wherever your opening was, you are just going to go between the 2 pieces of fabric, so not the batting, you want the 2 pieces of fabric, and just gently push the coaster through that opening. So depending on how large or small of an opening you made will depend on how easy or hard this is, but you're just going to repeat this process very carefully, pushing your fabric through. So I do this generally just one time all the way around for every coaster, and then I'm going to go back through and adjust to make sure that I'm getting all those little corners and making sure they pop out nicely. Now there are turning tools you can use for this that will help you kind of push the corner out. I use a pin by very, very carefully pulling the fabric up I will say a word of caution to this is that it can occasionally snag your fabric. So if you're going to do it this way, just be very careful, and there are lots of different turning tools available so that you don't have to do this. Next, I'm going to take all of my coasters, as you can see here, and I am going to wrap my interfacing around to see how big of a piece of interfacing I would need lengthwise, and then cut out about a 2-inch by however long I want it to go all the way around for the coasters. And what this is going to do is essentially we're just making a little sleeve to hold them all together. So as you can see here, I'm just going to bring this around, and I have it so that these two pieces of interfacing are actually overlapping, and I'm going to be adding snaps or some sort of button to hold it together. Once I have that done, I am then going to cut out 2 rectangular pieces of fabric that are the same size as that piece of interfacing. I cut it out slightly larger just so that I make sure that the interfacing is not too large. And then I'm just going to attach all of these together using my iron, press everything out so that we can begin the final steps for making our coaster, as well as work on that little sleeve for all the coasters to go in. So once I have the coaster pressed nice and flat and smooth, wherever that opening was on the coaster for where we had turned it right side out, I'm just going to take a quilting clip or two and clip it closed. That way I know that that's where I need to be sure when I'm top stitching, I am clipping that so it's nice and smooth and closed. I don't have to worry about it coming undone. So now I'm going to repeat this for each of the coasters so that I can have all of them complete. Now for that little sleeve, I'm going to press out the fabric to make sure that it is nice and smooth before I apply the interfacing, and then on one piece of the rectangle, I am going to apply the interfacing. So the bumpy side of my fusible interfacing, I'm going to put that the wrong side of my fabric, and then I am just going to follow the manufacturer's instructions to attach this. So for mine, it is just pressing it out using that heat, and it'll become a little stiffer. Once I have that done, I am then going to take the other piece of fabric that I had, and with right sides together, attach these using my quilting clip so that I can take a seam all the way around, being sure that again I leave a nice gap for turning. And for this, I just took a 1/2-inch seam allowance all the way around. Now it was time to start working on my coasters to finish these off, so I'm first going to top stitch all the way around my coaster. This is going to be a very narrow seam, so maybe about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, depending on how large you want it. And then this is going to allow us to close off that opening that we had, as well as give our coaster a little bit more decoration and flair around the edge. So this is what it currently looks like. The back also looks really nice. So I'm going to do one more step with my coaster, and that is I'm going to now take 1-inch seam allowance and sew all the way around just another square on the inside. So just I'm going to give it a little more definition and some place for your glass to go, so that it just gives it a little bit more look of a coaster. So you can see I'm using that seam guide that I talked about earlier. I found it to be incredibly helpful for this. If you did not have that though, you could definitely just mark with like tailor's chalk or some sort of pinning where 1-inch would be all the way around, so that you could just follow that nice seam for your coaster. So once you do that for each coaster, then we can just turn right side out our little sleeve that we made, and I'm going to do the same technique of just using the pin to press it open, and then I am going to just press this nice and flat and smooth and top stitch the little sleeve as well. Once you top stitch the little sleeve, that is actually the last sewing that we do for this project on the sewing machine. So then I just went through and clipped all of the pieces of thread off of all the coasters, off of the little sleeve, and now I have my coasters complete. So I have my 4 coasters here. I'm going to put them in this little sleeve, and then I just kind of brought the 2 edges together to see where I wanted them to sit. So I'm pretty happy with how it looks. So I'm just going to put a little pin to mark where I want my snaps to go, and I'm just going to be adding 2 snaps over at the 2 edges right there. And for this, you could use snaps. You could definitely use like those plastic snaps as well. I'm just going to use these little sew-on snaps, as I think that they will be really easy and they'll look good for it. So now it was just time to sew all of these on so that my coasters could be complete. Once I had these sewn on, you can see that they just snap really nicely. You could be done at this point. You could even skip this little sleeve if you wanted. I decided to add a little button, as I thought that it would be a nice touch, little red button to go with the gingerbread theme. So I'm just going to hand sew that on very quickly. And once that is on, everything is now done. So we have a 4 set of coasters, we have a little sleeve to connect them, very easy to take on and off to allow for easier storage. And I think that these turned out so cute and so fun, especially for the holidays. These also make great gifts, really very quick and easy to whip up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.